where the first human beings stood and walked, the world's second largest continent, home to 1 in 10 of the world's people, and number 5 in the 10 fastest growing economies, a global source of oil and minerals. In the 1960s, many African countries got their independence from the British and French governments. Freedom was given to Africans under certain conditions with lots of strings attached. Many pacts were signed, especially in the French colonies. South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Sudan, Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, and Gambia were colonized by the British and the Dutch. Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Mauritania, Senegal, Guinea, Ivory Coast, Mali, Burkina Faso, Togo, Benin, Niger, Chad, Central African Republic, Cameroon, Gabon, and the Republic of Congo were colonized by the French. These countries are known as les pays de la francophonie, which means French-speaking countries. Most of them are located in West, Central, and North Africa. Since the days of freedom, of independence, generations have changed. Some progress has been made. However, more remains to be done. Except for South Africa, when the British government gave independence to African countries, they left. The British government no longer interfered in the politics or in the economies of these countries. When the French government gave independence to African countries in the pact signed in the 1960s, they imposed a common currency called CFA, Franc of French Community of Africa. They also imposed French as a common language. One of the pacts imposed no trade or business between French colonies and other nations of the world except France. The French government decided to be a guarantor, a backer for these nations. Therefore, each time one of these countries wants to borrow money from the World Bank or do business with other countries, that African country has to do this transaction through the French government. That African country is obliged to pay some interest to France for such a transaction. These pacts have discouraged many countries and many people from doing business with West and Central Africa or in any former French colony in Africa. As a result, there is no competition in business, there is no open market system, there is no growth of the economy. Jobs are very limited. The unemployment is severe. Others are faced with one of the biggest decisions to make in their entire lives, to leave their families, friends, and their entire world behind and immigrate to a foreign land. All former French colonies must export their goods through France. These goods are priced by the French government at lower market value. Therefore, their governments do not make enough money to create jobs, to create a good healthcare system, or to create a strong education system. As a result, African nations are forced to borrow money at a high interest rate from rich nations and international institutions to be able to function. Therefore, African nations are constantly in debt. At this point, Africa cannot trade its way out of poverty without a level playing field. Many Africans are born in the villages. Their parents and relatives are farmers. Many of these parents were illiterate. Growing up in the villages, children learn at a young age. They must help their parents in the farms growing coffee, cocoa, cassava, and another work. Despite the fact that parents are literate, they encourage their children to go to school. They provide basic school supplies, such as clothes, shoes, pens and pencils. Many villages are similar, same architecture, same characteristics. Many houses are made of mud, wood, and covered with the leaves of bamboo. Sometimes, students attend school in another village, miles away. They must walk back and forth every day, mornings and afternoons. Parents think that their children will get their degrees, get good jobs, and take care of them. Sometimes take care of the entire village. They expect their children to be successful, to bail them out of poverty. But in reality, the chance of getting a job is very slim. After graduating from school in the villages, students attend colleges in the cities in pursuit of great success, yet are faced with a harsh reality. In the cities, teachers lecture students about the severity of unemployment, of AIDS, of African debts, of corruption, and the unfair trade of African products. Students become aware of the political climate and the impact of the poor economy. After graduating from universities, many students move back home with their parents or relatives. Finding jobs becomes crucial. Many become activists to pressure the government to change the situation. In 2002, the new democratically elected president of the Ivory Coast, Mr. Laurent Gbagbo, negotiated with the French government to stop their oppressive pacts. Mr. Gbagbo's attempts to lessen France's dominance over the Ivory Coast, he decided to contract with a Chinese company to build a bridge in Abidjan, the capital of the Ivory Coast. It was much more cost-effective than with a French company. Additionally, Mr. Gbagbo requested to French companies that operate in the Ivory Coast to start paying local taxes to the Ivory Coast government. In retaliation, the French government backed opposition parties with its own military and fought the people of the Ivory Coast and Mr. Gbagbo. Without freedom, some are forced to leave their country as political refugees. Others feel forced to leave to obtain a better life. United Nations has continuously sent aid to Africa and intervened in civil disputes. However, until the United Nations, along with the European Union, specifically changes the trade agreements of African nations and the pact signed in the 1960s between the French government and its former African colonies, these African nations will never be able to reach their full economic potential. What do African children possibly dream of? What future will they have? Many African children's futures are uncertain. Their lives are in jeopardy. What can we possibly do to save them? These questions remain unsolved.